Welcome to Storytime. Yes, it's really Mrs. Dickey under here. I'm going to take my mask off so we can read a story. I'm going to read a story today about possums. Have you ever seen a possum up close? They look like that. They have little pink noses and they're mostly gray. And believe it or not, they have a little pouch in their belly like a kangaroo. And the babies that they have, these are the babies, they live in that little pouch, and when they get big enough, then they crawl out. But they don't crawl far. They ride on their mommy's back. And their mommy wraps her big tail. She has a kind of a slender rat-type tail that they'll hang upside down in a tree. And that's where we get to this book. This book is called Playing Possum. And in this book, you see our friend hanging from his tail in the tree, and he's looking at friends, but this was after he changed from being so shy. And this is the story. It's about how you make friends even when you're a little shy. So Playing Possum is the name of the book. Alfred was born a possum. And when a possum feels nervous, he freezes. And he plays dead. So he acts like he's not alive. So he's dropping the flour because he's frozen. This was unfortunate for Alfred because he was a very nervous possum. Because of his nervous nature, Alfred felt uncomfortable being the focus of attention or having any attention. And so he did not do well at school. He did not excel in sports, and making friends was terrifying, and it was to even contemplate having a friendship. Alfred was a very lonely possum because he laid around frozen most of the time. That's how frightened he was. One afternoon, Alfred noticed Sophia, and Sophia was born an armadillo. And when the armadillo feels nervous, it curls up into a ball. So meeting someone new can be very scary for the armadillo, and so she can't handle it any more than Alfred. So Alfred played dead when he met her, and Sophia curled up into a ball. After a while, they both got calmer, and Alfred unfroze and Sophia unfurled. And as they stared at each other, they realized they had something in common. They were scaredy cats. Don't you think that's what you would call them? When they were together, knowing this made them feel safe. So they both had the shyness and being scared, but they felt safe when they were with each other because they had the same thing in common. When Sophia curled up, Alfred just waited. Alfred's sitting in the chair waiting for her, and he's drawing pictures. And Sophia has curled up in the ball. And when Alfred froze, Sophia just waited for him. But his hands were always sticking up in the air, so she'd wrap yarn around them and just continue knitting. And then, when Alfred would wake up, they would talk together. They began to trust that when they became themselves again, they would see a friend. So where would they see a friend? I guess in each other, because they were afraid of everybody else. Alfred hardly ever froze, and Sophia rarely turned into a ball because they felt comfortable and friendship was developing. They saw they had something in common with others, too, that sometimes felt afraid. Like the octopus. When he was in, or she was in the water and something would come close to it, it would squirt out ink and hide behind the ink because it was afraid of other things. And when the turtle would get frightened, he'd just bring his head back inside his shell and he'd hide. And then there's always the fainting goat. Well, when a fainting goat sees something that bothers it, it just falls down. just like Alfred. We can show them kindness and friendship, said Alfred. We can show them how to act when something scares them. Well, the porcupine always throws quills out when it gets frightened. And so if a dog would come to bite on the porcupine, he would get those needles, those quills in his mouth. And that would make them less anxious, she said. Yes, we could tell the skunk that she doesn't have to squirt people with the stinky spray. It took some practice. They had to wear their clothespins on their nose when they were around the skunk and the porcupine and the fainting goat. But as you see, they were able to begin to play cards on top of the little turtle's back, and everybody became friends. It took a lot of understanding and a little forgiveness, because sometimes our fish friends would get eaten by the octopus. But before long, making friends became easier, and so did other scary things. And this was fortunate. Look at them all running around together. For everyone. This time, they're painting a rainbow. Do you know what rainbows are? Rainbows are when rain stops and the sun comes out of the clouds, and it makes these beautiful colors, little spectrums of color. At this very library, I saw a double rainbow out the window on the east side. It was too cool. And everyone lived happily ever after because they understood they had the same problem. And now they're friends. Cool book, huh? We're having this story read right before St. Patrick's Day. And that's why I have shamrocks on. And I have shamrock socks. And we have rainbows and little leprechauns up on the wall. So rainbows mean a lot to us. Rainbows, with this character in this book, meant friendship. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a song played, and it's about the possum. And when you hear the word freeze, you just stop like this, just like the possum did when he would freeze because he was frightened of something. And he walks around on his tippy toes, and they really do. They're a funny little animal, and their rear end sways back and forth, and they have this long tail like you see here. This is a picture of maybe if you've never seen a opossum before, you would see it has a little pink nose, and look at these. They're the babies. And inside of her tummy, she has a pocket that opens up, and these babies stay inside of the pocket until they get big enough to crawl out, and they all hang onto her back, and she wobbles around with them everywhere she goes until they get too big. Then they have to be on their own. But even when she's hanging up in the tree like Alfred, well, the babies are hanging up in the tree too. They all use their tails. So this is a song that I'm going to tell you about, and I'll plug it in just a moment, okay? Just hold on.
Here's a game you all can play and learn to move the possum's way. Just tiptoe around until I say freeze. You're playing possum. Yes, a possum walks on tippy toes. That's the way a possum goes. But when danger's near, a possum knows to freeze. He's playing possum. Walking along, freeze, playing possum. Singing this song, freeze, playing possum. He's not very strong, and that's why he has the skill to stand so very still. He tippy-toes without a care. I guess he's got the time to spare. But if he should get an awful scare, he'll freeze. He's playing possum. Tippy-toe here, freeze, playing possum. Tippy-toe there, freeze. he's playing possum. When danger is near, a possum knows to freeze and never cough or sneeze. A possum walks on tippy toes. That's the way a possum goes. But when he's had a fright, a possum knows to freeze. That's playing possum.